Why didn't Max's DRS work this weekend? Max took the win in Barcelona, but the race was far from plain sailing. He went off at turn 4 after a big gust took away all of his rear downforce, and then his DRS wasn't working, apart from when it kind of did again. And then Red Bull had Checo get out of his way, so Max won the race. But the DRS was the most interesting bit about all of this, because it seems like something that the team should be on top of. And Max made his frustration about it very well known. So what went on? What part of this system failed, and why did it happen? Well, Scarbs has a very good theory about which one of these components were causing all of the issues. But even back in qualifying, the DRS was posing an issue for Max. On his final lap of Q3, one that could have been for pole, his DRS didn't open. But actually it turns out, if you dive into the data, even despite the DRS opening, the Red Bull is so fast in a straight line that it didn't lose much time on the straights. It just didn't gain any where it would have. If you look at this, the red line is Charles and the blue line is Max. And this is a speed comparison of their last laps in Q3, when the track had evolved a lot from the lap before. So it was a lap that really counted. If you look at these bits here, the end of the straights, the difference between the two cars isn't a lot. And actually from this, it looks like the Red Bull was going quicker. This meant that Charles gained most of his time to get pole in the really twisty stuff, because Barcelona has a lot of that. And then we get into the race where Max was running in P2 before then going off at turn 4. This was weird because we saw Sainz do the same a couple of laps before, and initially that made it look like there was oil on the circuit or something like that, as the incidents were almost a carbon copy, the same point in the corner and the same sort of spin. But the wind was really high on the circuit over the whole weekend, but particularly at that corner, it was unusually high on Sunday, and then also add to that, it was very gusty. So for the drivers, it becomes very tricky to predict how much grip they're going to have as they're going into the braking zone and then turning in. This caught Max out, sent him through the gravel, and he came out behind Russell, who despite gaining a lot of pace this weekend was slower than Max on race pace. Now, not to take away from George's defending, because it was epic, but Max was severely hampered by the lack of DRS, and it cost him a lot of time to Leclerc. We know how tough it is to overtake in Barcelona, and the end of the straight is where you do it, and with DRS, that kind of took that opportunity away from Max. And had it not been for the Ferrari power unit giving up, Max would have likely lost enough time to have been too far back to take the win if he did get past George.
He was on the straights, sometimes popping open, sometimes not, sometimes opening quite normally. And it really did hinder his race, because the entire car setup for the race weekend is based around having DRS available. If they knew they wouldn't have it, you'd set the car up slightly differently in terms of wing levels and things. So that has really caused him problems. So what really is going wrong with the Red Bull here? Because Sergio Perez wasn't having the issue.
Now, there are a number of things that the issue could have been. So let's take a look at the system as a whole. DRS systems are really quite cool. We don't look at this enough. There is a hydraulic actuator, the thing that does the moving, and then a very cool kinematic mechanism that opens the wing up really quickly and holds it in the right place. Then there are two hinge bearings either side of the wing to allow that top plane of the wing to open up. Initially, I thought it could have been an actuator problem, but if there are hydraulic issues causing it, then Max would have most likely had even bigger issues to deal with. Scarbs reckons he has it figured out.
So your rear wing flap flips up with a hydraulic actuator, pulling it open at speed when the driver has DRS available. Now, the process of doing this is the rear wing flap is pivoted at its trailing edge, just where it meets the kind of the curved down section of end plate. So you have a couple of bearings and a couple of metal pins there, which provides the pivot. What a lot of teams, including Red Bull, have is an extension of the DRS pod, creates an extra mountain, an extra pivot point in the middle of the wing. Because the wings are so wide now, they would tend to bend down under load, as you would expect, kind of bowing slightly. So having an extra pivot in the middle just means it's better supported at 3 points across its trailing edge. Now, what we understand is the problem they were having wasn't that the DRS actuator was failing and it wasn't pulling it open, but the whole system was binding. So what was probably happening, and again, we'll have to wait to hear the full story from Red Bull, is these pins, these pivot points on the trailing edge.
But this issue was spotted by Red Bull in qualifying, and they did everything they could to fix it. They replaced the parts.
Now, the clue to this was Max had problems in qualifying, but in Parc Fermé after qualifying overnight and before the race, teams are allowed to replace certain components if they're faulty or giving teams problems. For Max Verstappen, included the flap pivot pins, which are these little pins which go in there, allow the wing to flip upwards. So what I think is happening is it's not so much that it's not being pulled open, but there's so much binding in those pins at the 3-point across the trailing edge that it just wouldn't pull it open when you wanted to.
But to me, on the face of it, this didn't add up. What would have changed about these systems in the last couple of weeks? Well, Scarbs thinks it's the weight issue.
The reason this may be a problem is going back to the weight saving story, which has been a whole case for the entire year. Now, Red Bull have said they've now found about 10 kilograms of weight savings on the car, bringing them down towards that minimum weight limit, which is absolutely crucial for performance.
Now we know that 10 kilos adds up to 0.3 of a second, and then if you add that it's a 66 lap race, this time difference is definitely worth chasing. So they will have been saving every bit of weight they can from every little component. And they don't just do this by cutting back on paint and other stuff, but redesigning even the tiniest components from existing setups like the DRS, and these rear wing pins could have been on that list.
So it could be the flap itself, it could be the pivot pins or what they're mounting into, but something there has obviously gone beyond being stiff but heavy to now being light but unreliable. So Red Bull will have to go back and redo their calculations on these parts.
So it does add up, especially when you consider some of the radio messages from GP, Max's race engineer, to Max. He said, Max, try pressing the DRS after your curbing. And this was coming out of the final chicane and onto the straight. So it sounds to me like the vibration of the curbing on the exit could have played a part in the binding, whether the pins were shaken out of place or just got stuck. We don't know. But in reality, this is a simple fix for an F1 team. They would test and redesign the pins and then get them fitted for the next race and they're all good. So we really doubt this will be an issue in Monaco, but who knows. You should check out this video about Aston Martin's suspiciously Red Bull looking side. Thank you for watching and we'll catch you in the next one.